Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Natalie Flachina, the Associate Deputy Director here at the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. And we thank you all for coming to our resident artist talks. We're also streaming this live on Facebook as well, and the recording will be on Facebook Live or on our YouTube page in a couple of weeks as well. As most of you know, most of you are longtime fans. We hold these talks in conjunction with our residency program. So we'll have some more with our upcoming residents who will be starting in December in the new year. So I want to thank you all for being here today. We're going to start with Gabo Martinez. So Gabo will be finishing up her residency at the end of November. Gabo was born in Mexico and raised in Houston, Texas. She graduated from Texas State University in San Marcos with a BFA in studio art. Drawing upon both traditional and contemporary motifs, she utilizes those visual languages to craft a narrative of her own that reclaims and honors her heritage. Combining the use of printmaking and ceramics, she creates installations and spaces that evoke the warmth of brown bodies and rich, vibrant colors. These energetic spaces become vehicles for the reemergence of barrio roja, which is red clay, a material with ancestral legacy, into the contemporary moment. She molds these soft, malleable clay into objects that immortalize her culture and narratives. She has exhibited her work at the Front Gallery here in Houston, Braun Gallery in Marfa, Lone Gallery in Dallas, Texas A&M University Gallery in Laredo, and the Sonoma Community Center in California. She also has some works here in her studio, which y'all can visit after the talk, and at the neighborhood store in Dallas. So I'm going to pass it over to you, and we'll have time for questions at the end as well. And those of you joining us online, feel free to leave any questions in the chat.
Okay. So again, thank you all for joining us. I'm happy to have y'all here. Grateful to have your support. My name is Gabo. I'm the resident here, and like Natalie said, yeah, till the end of November. I have the studio. It's the Fishbowl, so it's like that. I thought I did. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
No, it should be working.
So yeah, I mean, my time here has been really sweet. Being here has allowed me to have more time to play and cultivate curiosity in my own practice, which is something I always welcome, especially with clay, which is such a malleable material, and it invites you almost to be playful. Yeah, so I mean, if any of y'all want to join me in my studio afterwards, like I'd be more than happy to host. And then also I wanted to mention that there is the Fall Festival coming up, and so that'll be November 2nd, Saturday, and I'll be doing a little activity for everyone to come in. It's free. We'll be carving hand-size offerings for the Day of the Dead altar, so that should be fun. Can I go ahead and play? Cool. Yeah, so that was a little brief intro. And I just wanted to share some background with y'all. I was born in Guanajuato, Mexico. So my parents are actually both from that hometown as well. My whole entire family still lives there. So I just wanted to share some pictures with y'all. This is my grandma when she was a teacher, and my grandpa is the last one on the left. And as you can see, everyone in my hometown, they're all cowboys. So I wore my boots today to honor that. And I come from a very large family. Like both of my grandmothers come from families of like more than 8 siblings. So I feel like, yeah, being connected with my family, and that's always been really important to me, and honoring that legacy. Here are some pictures. That's me as a baby in Mexico, and my grandpa. And you know, growing in Mexico has definitely influenced the work that I make. I wasn't always intentional with my work, but I feel like now there's almost no excuse not to. So you know, I grew up in my hometown. It used to be known for the bricks that they produced out of the soils from there. And so the terracotta color has always been really strong I've always had a connection to it. And so that's why I primarily choose to work with the red clay to honor that, and to connect, to add that context to my work as well. Um, and yeah, these are sort of like motifs that have been present in my life. La Virgen de Guadalupe. That's the front of my grandma's house in Mexico. So these colors have definitely influenced the work that I make. If you're familiar with my work, it's very vibrant. The colors are very saturated. I try to activate the space with those colors. Most shows that I've had, when they give me the liberty to, I do try to do full installations and utilize color in a way that transforms the space, because I like the idea of creative spaces maybe acting as a portal to other dimensions where we can feel safe, where we can feel joy, or we can feel whatever it is that we're feeling. And that was me as a cool baby. Thanks for laughing. Okay, so this is some of the work I made when I was an undergrad. So like Natalie said, I went to Texas State University. I was there under Michelle Conroy, who was a tenured professor. She was taught in Japan. So the work, she was also like a purist. So I was actually working with stoneware. I was working with porcelain. I was mixing my own slips, which is like when you mix oxides into watered down clay, and that's how I was doing these techniques. And it was a lot of trial and error. It was 4 years of me trying to figure out, I guess, like find my voice in the material. And I was working with stoneware, and we were working with gas kilns, which are really intense. And you can see that the pieces would come out sort of washed out. So that's something I always struggled with. There was one semester where I made my whole batch of that semester. I put it in the kiln. I had mixed my own glazes from scratch, and all my clear glaze, which is, clear is like a transparent, so that's how you can see the color underneath. All my clear glaze came out white, and it was so tragic. And so for, when you get a bachelor's in fine art, your last semester you have a thesis. And so for that, I was trying to hone in and no mistakes. So I was more intentional about the materials I was working with. And that's when I found Longhorn Red, which is the type of clay that the armadillo clay makes. And I started mixing colors that resonated with me. And for my thesis, I made 2 of these vessels that were like 3 feet. They were really large, and my professor helped me make them. I actually threw half of it, and then the rest of it was coil built. So if any of y'all are familiar with Korean pottery, how they make ongi pots, that's the similar technique that I used. And you can see this is when I kind of started finding my path and my voice. I was playing with black underglaze on white earthenware. And these are the first terracotta pots that I made. So that was really exciting. And I was carving it with my own poetry. That was pretty dark, pretty emo, but it gave me a really nice release. And then, you fire the pieces twice. And yeah, it was pretty cathartic for me. Yeah. And so this was the actual installation at the Texas State Galleries. That last semester, I also realized I wanted to be more intentional about the way I take up space. So I did take a printmaking class, and that's when I started doing my relief prints. And initially, it was more of like, I was thinking of like, what backdrop can I add? And so I was thinking about color matching. I was thinking about the motifs that I was carving on my pots and how I could translate that over. And with the help of Jeff Dell, he helped me print some of those things. And that's when I started doing relief printing. And this was that picture on the left. That was the first solo show I had, which was in Dallas at Conduit Gallery. And it was a really small show, but yeah, it was pretty influential. And it was such a small space that it allowed me to kind of like play with the install and things like that. Beautiful. Thank you. And so later on, I moved back to Houston for a bit, and I was working at the Glassell. This is the kind of work I was making then. I was trying to explore brighter colors, explore different techniques or different motifs for the relief. Um, yeah, it was just an exploration of form. It was an exploration of different surface design on the pottery. So I was still working with the white earthenware just because the colors pop so much more on that white clay. And these are some spiky pots that I made over at the glass cell, and those were also large. One of those almost killed me actually. It was on the wheel, on the potter's wheel, and I accidentally stepped on it and it started wobbling and it fell on me. But we both survived. But yeah, working large is very intensive, and I could only do it at the glass cell because they do have 5-foot kilns. I don't work at that scale anymore. It's also work that's harder to push just because it's larger. You have to sell it for more expensive. And then also every now and then I do a batch where, which y'all saw the first picture ever of whenever I first started carving words on my pottery, but it's also very time intensive, so I don't do it often. So very limited edition pots here. And I was inspired by the Beatles, which I'm way more yeah. Yeah, so again, finding those colors that really resonate with me. And you can see the forms are pretty simple. You know, I've always been drawn to full forms and then finding ways to visually address that. And specifically like this pattern, it's really fun because it shifts and it grows with the form. So I've always enjoyed doing those. And then this was when I was doing my residency over in Sonoma in California. And so that allowed me to start going more sculptural. You can see that I started altering the rims of my pots. I started experimenting with slab work. I started making these really large platters and finding ways to hang them on the wall. And so that was really fun. And so the show there, the residency culminated with a solo show called Earth Flower, Flor de Barro. And you can see like that's the poster child that I made for that show. And then there's cracks and stuff because it was a technique that I was exploring for the first time. And also, you know, when you move around, I was working with completely different materials. That was like a higher fire clay, so it was a bit challenging in that aspect. But this show definitely got the gears going for how you can activate the space with color. And the yellow looks a lot more green here, but it was like bright yellow, and I painted those scallops all over the gallery. It was a pretty cool space. And you can see those platters, how I finished them. I actually glazed them with a black glaze, so it was almost like an obsidian mirror. It was pretty cool, and you could see your reflection in them. So I'm slowly inching towards concepts that feel more intentional in that way, you know, like obsidian mirrors. That's something from Mexico. I was exploring more complicated forms that were more intense for building them and exploring different colors. These are more pictures. These are the larger pieces that I made for the show. And everything was yellow. I made these like, sheesh, they were like 10-foot long prints, and I put them in front of windows. It was so scary. I could have like fallen through. But it was fun. It was fun to work at that scale. I really enjoyed challenging myself. So that was the challenge. It was a very large space. So that was the challenge for this show of like, how can I take up the most space? And then that just kind of informed the work that I continued to make. This was for my residency in Laredo, which was a really fun one. And I was able to explore different forms. You can see that I'm still scalloping the rims, adding those thorns. And this show, I wanted to hold space for vulnerability. Like the whole show was about honoring how I'm a crybaby. So that yellow piece, I have it at my studio, and it has tears in the motif, and I glaze them gold. So it's like there's power in being vulnerable, which was really important to me, especially considering that Laredo, it was mostly like Mexican American students. So I saw myself in them. And yeah, I wanted to push those concepts and yeah, hopefully inspire. And then all of that culminated to this. So this is a solo show I had here at the Craft Center last year. I hope some of you were able to experience that. But we painted the whole space yellow. And I did another pottery piece with some poetry on it. This is some of the work that I did. We did a whole setup of like ofrenda. So I was trying to like really be intentional and tap in. And you know, it was a really beautiful experience because all these materials I found them here. And I think like with my work and the installations I make, it's like it doesn't matter where I am. It's like I carry that historical context with me. And even here, like these legacies, these materials are so accessible. So that was like also really moving to find a home outside of home. Here's some more pictures of it. We did some prints and installed. We got the yellow paint to match the color of the prints, like exactly. It's pretty incredible. Maria Elisa definitely, yeah, she killed this one. And then so for 2 years I had a little home studio in San Marcos. So this is some of the work that I was able to explore there. And I'm just trying to be more playful. Like I said, I want to cultivate curiosity. I want to cultivate play. Um, but also looking back on all the ancestral ceramic technologies that like my ancestors and a lot of the cultural legacy of Mexico. So I've been more playful with it. You know, this is a double-headed chihuahua, trying to do little devils, trying to make it more figurative, more narrative, um, and exploring different forms, different textures, different colors. That makes me really excited. And then here's some of the work I've been making here, which my challenge for this residency was to go extra figurative and sculptural. And so this is a bowl from the culture Chupicuaro, which is from the borderlands of Michoacan and Guanajuato. In my hometown, actually, every time they dig up dirt to make a new house or anything like that, they find figurines from this culture. So, of course, I've always been drawn to it. And this is a piece, a bowl that I made in honor of this piece. And I'm actually about to recreate it again, and I'm gonna do the finish a little differently. You can see that I was mostly carving on that one. So just trying to be, and you know, I'm not copying it exactly. I'm just drawing inspiration from it. And then here's another two pieces that I made that were based on this little guy. And it's just been fun too to you know, look at these figurines that were made so long ago and to understand how they were crafted and like tap into that has been a lot of fun. Yeah, clay is such an ancestral material. It's really incredible. And then here is the fertility goddess that I'm working on. She's currently cooking in the kiln. But I'm definitely taking my time. You can see how intricate the painting was. So you know, most of what I do is carving. So this is completely different. I'm having to use brushes and I'm painting it on. So it's been taking some time. And I haven't thought of a title yet, but I feel like it's probably going to be like a political piece because it's like a fertility goddess, but at the same time, like, you know, our rights are being taken away. So that's why the pot on top is really pissed off. Yeah, but it's been so incredible working this way. And that piece was foil made. I threw the little feet and then everything else was made with foils. And she's going to be painted similar to this. So what I'm doing now is painting all the intricate designs. And it's been really exciting. It's been really exciting to push my work in that way. I've never given myself the space or the time to do so. And yeah, I feel really inspired. And if you go to my studio, you know, I have all my sketchbooks there. So it's really cool to push my work to be more like my sketches, like graphic and almost like illustration based. These are some of the figurines that people actually donated to the cultural center in my hometown. Yeah, it's really interesting. This is like a male figurine and he has like the duality faces. Really cool stuff. So yeah, I also made those and they were kind of inspired by those figurines, which these are from Jalisco, so it's a completely different state. But just thinking about how they're built, um, yeah, I'm trying to replicate that. It's been fun. And Yeah, that's about it. Now we can open up the space for questions, and I invite you to ask anything. Um, I don't think there's such a thing as like a dumb question. And something about my practice is like I always try to demystify it as well. Like I feel like we can all play with some mud, make some stuff. But so yeah, the floor is yours if y'all have any questions for me. Yes.
The spikes or thorns are very compelling. Do they come from somewhere? They come from you or any thoughts?
You know, where I started working with that technique was for my thesis pots. So I think for that, since the poetry was so personal, and even though the piece was like visually striking and colorful, I think I wanted to give the concept a sense of like defensiveness or like protective. So they're definitely thorns for sure. And I just like how it can break up the space
Sure.
and add a different layer to what is just a vessel. Absolutely. Yeah, what's up? I have not. That's something, well, I mean, I printed on some of my clothes, but with relief ink, you always get kind of like a grainy texture in comparison to what most of us have seen, which is screen printed. But that is something I want to explore, yes. That would be fun to get into. Absolutely. Yeah, what's up?
You talk about, and we know you do print making,
Mhm.
ceramics, and in your thesis show, you talk about poetry.
Mm.
Poetry. Do you still write poetry? Does that come into your work at all? What about those kind of like literary?
Yeah, I don't write poetry as much as I used to. I think when I first, like my freshman year of college, since like moving out in that sense of independence, I was like and I was reading a lot of poetry. So I was writing a lot of poetry then. I definitely will write down thoughts here and there, but nothing as intense as that. But I do try to be intentional about what, especially when you're carving words, you know, because ceramics is forever. In a sense, you're immortalizing whatever it is that you're building. And unless someone tosses your pot into a volcano, like that pot is going to exist forever. Uh, so I don't take that lightly. But every now and then I write poetry, but not as much. Any other questions? Yeah, what's up?
So when you're building these ancestral figures, figures, if you're looking at source material and you're saying you're going to figure out how to build them, they seem very complicated. You know, is it trial and error? How are you figuring it out? You know, the ones with the arms and the structure that was hard to.
Yeah, it is a lot of trial and error, absolutely. And you know, you can only understand a figure so much by looking at pictures. This summer, I had the opportunity to go to the Anthropology Museum in Mexico, and that was very moving to see these pieces in person. You can sort of see how they were built, how they're not perfect, and you can gather more like ideas as to how to build them. Um, but yeah, Google has a database for all the collections in museums, and some of them you can do sort of three-dimensional look at them, so that can be more informative. But I think that's why these are coil pinched, so that as I'm forming the figure, you're sort of shaping it. And the initial form is a lot more rough than that. That's how they come out after it's smooth and everything like that. Yes.
So, right? They give similarities to African art. I don't know if you ever thought about that or thought that.
Absolutely.
Similarity, right?
Yeah, especially like the wooden carved masks and stuff like that from Africa. Yeah, absolutely.
Then I wonder how far back the connection, right? Their connection.
Yeah.
I also wonder, we think about, like you said, many people when they're trying to build a house or something, they find these.
And a lot of them will stash them, which is fair too. I mean, if it stays in the pueblo, it stays in the pueblo. Because the fertility goddess that I'm actually recreating, she lives in Paris, so she hasn't been repatriated to me.
But is there more of, you know, when you think about
Egyptian and why they
Yeah.
were doing the terracotta.
I think there were a lot of cultural influences for sure. And looking back at the records, you know, like Mexica people and other indigenous tribes from Mexico have been traveling the Southwest and like so much of the land. Um, and there's a lot of cultural exchanges with the art for sure. The thing I don't know about these is that a lot of them, when they have, for example, this piece in the eye, like some of them, I believe they had gemstones or something, and then whoever looted them must have like taken them out. So I don't know if the eyes were actually meant to hold some sort of stone. But no, they certainly look like masks. And a lot of them, when they would make these figurines, they were for like when you got buried with them. So they
Yeah.
had that ceremonial, ritualistic purpose.
So how, last question,
No, it's okay.
how often did they find?
It sounds like pretty often. Whenever we went to the community center, they were saying that they did a drive where they were inviting people to donate their pieces, and a lot of the people were like, "Oh, I'm only going to donate a single piece." And apparently, I have an uncle who has a lot of work, but I haven't been to his house. So I think some of the people definitely keep them, which I think is fair. I mean, I feel like sometimes when you contact the government, they might just keep it in the, like they might not be sharing that with the public, but I don't know. But they find them pretty often. Yeah.
Thank you, Gabo. We really
Yes.
appreciate the support. And we'll be able to visit your whole studio after our next talk as well. Would you mind muting the computer? And we have a couple more chairs here. And we want to break. Thank you, Gabo. Quick shift. Let me pull James. One second, James is just grabbing it. Jamie, sorry. You'll just unmute the computer after I.
Okay.
And then just follow and insert the introduction. Okay. Well, thank you, Gabo. That was really wonderful to hear. Gabo is now. But next up is Jamie Sterling Pitt. Jamie started his residency in September and will be a resident to the end of February 2025. So you have lots of time to catch him in his studio. So let's jump right in. Having suffered a traumatic brain injury many years ago, Jamie developed an artistic practice that serves as an autobiographical image bank, representing memories, places, sensations, and reinterpreting those experiences in the form of 2- and 3-dimensional reconstructions. This process became a tool to help him cope with his short-term memory loss and difficulties with language. Originally from New York, Jamie earned his BFA from the University of New Mexico and his MFA from Mills College. He currently lives and works in Houston. His work has been the subject of solo exhibitions in San Francisco, Boston, Los Angeles, New York, and Berlin, and group exhibitions in Lohmeyer Sculpture Park in St. Louis and the Schneider Museum in Ashland, Oregon, as well as throughout the Bay Area in New York. Most recently, his work was shown in dialogue with J.B. Blunk at Blunk Space and solo exhibitions at Ratio 3 in San Francisco and Seven Sisters here in Houston, who also represents him. His work is in the permanent collection at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Blanton Museum in Austin, and the Berkeley Art Museum. I'm going to turn it over to you, Jamie. If you'll just unmute your computer. Sorry, I can come do it too if you need me to.
There, is that better? There we go.
I think so. Yep, that should be good.
It's not letting me go through the slides.
Would the spacebar work or the arrow?
Okay,
Working now.
it is now. Okay. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Gabo. I think there's a lot of crossover in our practices. So I think it's kind of, there'll be some fluidity in what I'm going to share and what Gabo is sharing. You know, our work is very different. So this talk is going to look a little different because my brain functions a little bit differently. This talk means a lot to me, and I hope you enjoy it. So you'll see in my studio, I hand drew the entire talk. There'll be photographs at the very end, and then you can come into my studio. I've done numerous artist talks, and right now, the beginning of my residency and moving to Houston and reclaiming my childhood name, which will make sense. So I've been James Sterling Pitt forever. If you want more images of past exhibitions and work, just Google me. There's artist talks, it's all out there, but I wanted to do something different in the spirit of the times we're living in, the spirit of this residency and what's happening in my studio. Additionally, I will be doing a hands-on Fall Festival, where we'll be making buttons. So buttons are important to me. I made everyone buttons in books back there if you haven't gotten one. This is a little bloom, but what we're gonna do during Fall Festival is it's a week before the election. So we're gonna all make buttons about whatever we need to say and our truths so that we can wear them and circulate through Houston with whatever we need to, what's ever on our mind. Additionally, tomorrow I'll be giving a talk at 1 o'clock at Basket Books. I curated a show there, my dear friend Ben Peterson. I encourage you to come to that too. Okay, so without further ado, it dawned on me as I was putting it together, this is my first artist talk as Jamie Sterling Pitt. So it's gotta be different. So the book back there, the transmutation and the gift. Transmutation is a big part of my practice, materially, conceptually, get more into that. But what's in that book is my dear partner Reed got me a typewriter because everyone's telling me right now to tell my story or retell my story, which I'll get into, and I want to do it by typewriter. I'm kind of very anti-technology right now with all this AI stuff, whatever, so I'm trying to be as analog as possible about how information gets extracted from me. Okay, so you'll see this is how I draw. So I'm going to kind of talk through this. I'll make eye contact as much as I can. But in reclaiming my name that was traumatically extracted from me, happy rebirthday to release. Reclaim many traumatic extractions. James has left the studio to make room for Jamie to grow. Full play to heal. So please note, there's talks within talks. I don't expect everyone to get that in this talk. I'm making this a book that will be available, just not yet. So you can see cicada. So C-I, and I just went from the top and got all the letters to write out cicada. And then you can read just, the other one is ally, happy, ease, ions, grow, full, play, heal, and then the cicadas. Okay. We are living in a constructivist time. Let's build together with empathy to make some senses out of all of this nonsense. In order to tell my story and growth forward, tropic, this talk will be organic, analog, and solidarity for all the stolen flowers from our gardens. This activation will be an opening, a portal, a window into my practice, an organic entry into my TBI brain. Backward shadow to not be ashamed of my shadow. traumatic brain injury. Forwards towards beautifying trauma. Building, rising, acceptance, intuitive neurology. An activation to protect from continued extractions. This is a safe and sage space to share and listen and meet me and each other. Active conversation. I have carefully sculpted and drawn this talk in tactility, chosen my words to speak openly and honestly. I pollinate, you pollinate, we all pollinate. So in the spirit of listening and constructivism, I'm new here. Can you show me the way? Bill Callahan, Jill Scott Heron. Please do not leave me. Let us do the untitled flower work. Boss John Otter. Okay, so first, I need to do a couple acknowledgements because I would have never had the courage to do this and be this vulnerable without acknowledging all of this. So, gratitude to Lucchesa, Bronfman, Barismo for opening my mind and wings and web to an active telling of ourselves and in turn building our community so we can safely fly together. Thank you, Jason Poland, for being a brother in hand, and thank you, Jessica Silverman, for seeing it. Thank you, Reed Bussey, here in spirit and streaming the talk at Ollie Shop. And in making this shirt, she drew me a shirt in my studio. It's kind of hiding under my jacket because it's chilly. Of a fragment of my studio for seeing and feeding me. Lauren Pfizer for the friendship, collaboration, and pollination. Lauren, unfortunately, is sick today. Didn't want to get everyone sick, but Lauren has been coming and using my studio. I'll explain all of that as we move forward. And then HCC and all of your donors for your labor and generous support to give all of us residents the gift and the space to grow and heal. 3 more slow forward. Aaron Dorn and Tom Rand at Seven Sisters for taking care of me and our gallery family. Sandy Elsick, oops, right back. Sandy Elsick is here for teaching me how to be tropic. To Houston for seeing and embracing my work. I see you and hold space for you. Please return and see my invisible other abilities. Let's butterfly stroke through my neural water glide. Let's grow, let's go. Okay, so some slides. This is a chronology of my work: research, trauma, loves, connections, education, growth, etc. Full plate to heal. The beginning. So what this is this is kind of how I make associations in my work. So the very top left is a tiger mask that I made in 1st grade when I was still Jamie. I became James at the end of 1st grade. That is Borges' dream tiger that is tattooed on my left arm that was almost amputated. It's one of the most beautiful short stories, and I love that that's what he thought the dream tiger looked like. Magdalena Soares Franquez's tiger I drew at the San Francisco Zoo, and then a tiger Jason Poland drew. My thesis show at UNM, as I was putting this together, I realized at the forefront of my thinking has always been this idea of organic nature and technology and information and how those all connect. So this show was made up of, I think, 50 different panels that all locked together. And these 2 ones really resonated with me as I was putting this talk together. I visited California for the first time because my brother moved to Santa Cruz for school, and there was the monarch butterfly clusters. And I thought about kinship, families, and holding each other. And then I also was making these pixels. So I'd photograph nature and then pixelate it and then hand paint the pixels of it. So that's the Pacific Ocean, the same beach where the monarch butterflies are. So thinking about migration patterns and how information moves. This is an analog tape, VHS. I was making these fluid animations, painting animations. It used to be very different. You'd have dials and knobs, and it was like much more intuitive. This is a VHS tape that I sent to graduate school. And that was how I applied to graduate school. I just sent them a VHS tape. It worked. This is my MFA show at Mills. So the top is what it looked like, but it was a sculptural mapping of the sounds of cicadas during my childhood in the summertime of New York. This was made with automotive paint MDF. It was like as sterile as possible about nature. I mean, everything was laser cut, color coded through the automotive paint, spray booth, like so different than what I'm doing now, but still about the same thing conceptually. Okay, so July 2nd, 2007, an accident, Sebastopol, California, a dream, Los Alamos, New Mexico. So this is where it gets a little intense for a minute, but I feel like it's important to talk about. So I was in an NDE automobile accident en route to teach at CCAC, where a street sweeper fell asleep at the wheel and struck the left side of my car, accelerating across the double yellow line at a blind turn. This resulted in my TBI, physical disabilities, and PTSD. Jurassic artist residency in Woodside, California. I had done a residency there after graduate school, and the director heard about my accident. And I went through extensive surgeries, rebuilding my body. It was not fun as an artist because you're just in your head, and now everything's different. You don't know if you can make work again, or you're not going to be able to make the kind of work you're making. And all your perceptions just completely changed. So during their off season, he invited me to come up there for 2 weeks, and they fed me, took care of me. He just wanted to see like what can you make work. There was like no pressure. It was just a gift of time and space that this residency has been. So what happened is I went home for Christmas to Los Alamos, New Mexico, where my mom lives, not knowing what I was going to make. Kind of creating some anxiety. I had this dream where I was in a classroom from graduate school filled with every single student I'd ever been in school with to the age appropriate that they were. There was the type of work I was making, automotive paint work on the wall. The teacher was my undergraduate teacher who really pushed me to be more folky and tactile. And he said, take the work down. And all the students started taking these things off the wall. And he pointed to the back corner of my studio. And he said, your work's back there. And we went back, and these are the things that I saw in the dream. So there's this one. So this was the first one I made when I was at Jurassic. And it's just made, they're in the studio. I don't normally share them, but I thought it was appropriate to bring them in and share. All I had was like a sketchbook and some paper, and there was a wood pile and used paint. And so I started constructing this thing, and it's now since been pointed out that it looks like the side of a brain, the side of a head brain, which is really interesting to me. This one, I titled Angel. When I had the accident, I told the paramedics that my grandma was sitting on my lap and took the force. My mother then, that same day, got a call saying I was dead. All of the china she gifted my mom and father who had divorced at this point, was pulled to the front of her cabinets. Amazing. Like this world magic really does happen, and we just have to be open to it. So, angel for my grandma. Okay. This is the third one from the dream. It's now been pointed out that it looks like a human being sitting driving with their shoulder compound fractured, which is what happened to me. So trippy that like in my mind, these were abstract sculptures, but they were actually depictions of trauma, right? So then I was like, what am I gonna do? I had made the three things from the dream. My short-term memory at that point was like Groundhog's Day. Like I couldn't, there was no carryover. So I had a really hard time trusting what I was experiencing. But even before the accident, I'd always fall asleep with paper next to me when I sleep. I woke up some point that night and did this drawing. Woke up the next day and was like, where the hell did this come from? Shared it with my neurologist, and he's like, you found your way of talking and organizing. So with the short-term memory, it was like I couldn't write the same way. I still can't write. I still can't read the same way. That's why I'm doing the talk this way. But I looked at this and I was like, okay, here we go. You know, I have language. And there's hundreds of these drawings now. Okay, so go quick. So Valencia Street, Mission District, San Francisco, California. My brain settled, body settled, was walking with a cane, got my neurological tests. They took my driver's license and cut it in half. I'm no longer able to drive, so I had to leave the country, go back to the city, had no money at the time, and rented a closet on Valencia Street. It was 150 square feet, built a loft above. So this is a drawing of the workspace I made below it. It got so filled. And at that point, I had no intentions of sharing this work with anybody. And it was just made with scraps from the street, receipts, whatever I could gather just to make forms from the drawings. I then, a curator that I would have coffee with regularly, got my trust to come into the apartment and see the work. And she asked me to do an installation of my apartment in the window of ETA left window gallery, which is still a thing. So it was like, and it's literally 2 blocks from where my apartment was. So we just put it in like a cart and just down in this like built. It was like amazing. And this show brought so much joy to people. And all of a sudden, like it was healing. Like my trauma was healing for people. It was like a way for people just to walk down the street and just like it's in there. And then galleries started calling, and that was a whole nother thing. So that's why the middle is going to be a map of works, experiences, occurrences, collaborations, and inspirations. An active organism, not fixed with room to grow. So it's how my brain works. Again, I didn't want to just be like, here's an exhibition I did. Here's an exhibition I did. So the clock of fluid association. And this is something I'm going to be making in the studio, where each of those bars, time, it's going to be able to rotate, but you're going to be able to take each one off and move them. So it can change your time and what you need to hear every day. So again, very Dadaist, very constructivist. So this is kind of a mental mapping of how I connect. And it can be anything from the ferry ride, you know, to College of Marin, where I did a very large exhibition called Points after my father passed away. You know, Alicia McCarthy, Sahara Khoury, Dean Mills, Lee Markopoulos, who was a brilliant curator, who I was working on a show that was going to open in Greece, and she got hit by a car in front of in LA, part of the museum, and that never happened. So there's just been, and it was like the same time Ghost Ship Fire happened. It's like, it's been a lot. So instead of going through it, this is what it looks like, right? It's like, it doesn't have to be. And then I started doing collaborations with musicians in exhibitions. And that's something that will come into what happened in the studio right now. I actually did one in San Marcos right before you were there. That was my first time coming to Texas, and I did guided meditation with musician JD Emmanuel during the test season. So it was like a really beautiful way of activating the space. Here's current. So some things on my mind. Here are some books. You'll go in my studio and see I've created a library for people, using parts of my stipend to buy books from Basket Books to help support them, but also for me and for others. So I've had days where people come in on Saturday and they just take some books instead of a piece of furniture, right? And just research, which is really important to me. Music is also very important. So here's a bunch of records I've been listening to. There'll be music in there. It's supposed to be quiet, but sometimes. And there's also an analog tape set and Walkman, so you can take music and listen and look at books in there. Okay, so welcome to the studio as an organism, an organic classroom. So when I applied to this residency, I've primarily in exhibitions shown sculpture, drawing, more formal displays, but I'm always thinking about how to make the displays funkier, tiered, activated, but they've not been like fully taken over, right? And I had an exhibition in Santa Fe during COVID where you had to have an appointment to go because of that. So I made a waiting room for people, like a sterile waiting room for people to sit in the front of the gallery while they waited for the next person to go out. So I built furniture for that space. And then I built a bench in front of the exhibition that was installed at floor level. So you could sit on the cold floor with the work because there was only one person in there at the time. So the work wasn't in danger. So I tried to think like this moment, what do I do? So I started exploring furniture. I then showed with a couple design galleries, showed with JB Blanc, and moved to Houston and started volunteering in the garden. Thank you, Reed. Thank you, Sandy. And found out about this place. And I thought, what a wonderful place to maybe explore functionality in my work. So that's what I've been doing. And I applied saying I wanted to make furniture to be activated by people. And I didn't know what that was meant in the past. It meant healers, poets, musicians, and there'll be some of that. But I listen, like a big part of my practice and curating is just to listen to what is happening, right? And here, moving here, I realized how hard it was to find a studio space. And how hard it was. I just heard a lot of people saying they wanted community, they wanted gathering. And so I started building furniture in there for people to come and work with me on Saturdays. So that's part of the activation. And it's been beautiful because my friend Lauren has come in. You'll see some of his work in there. He comes in once a week and draws. He's an influencer, a model, a beautiful human being, but he's being seen for his skin color and how beautiful and stylish he is, and not as an artist, which is what he wants people to see. So we're trying to revalue things, right? Like really think about what people need. There's clay in the studio for a boy named Justice, who's the son of a friend of ours, Jennifer, who came into the studio on last Saturday, and was like, hey, I'm an aspiring sculptor. And I'm like, can I see some of your work? And it was sick. So I'm like, you want to make sculpture in here with me next Saturday? He's like, yes. I'm like, what do you need? He's like, a block of terracotta clay. I'm like, you got it. So it's in there. He's on vacation. But it's beautiful. Like the conversations, like I just started the organism and now it's just keeps growing. Like I'm going to be doing working with the new social practice program at Sam Houston. I had somebody come in the other day who has a friend whose son has a TBI who's struggling. He's going to come in, we're going to talk. I like being an ally for people. I like not letting the trauma I've been through shut me down, right? There's no reason. It's like, we just have to keep doing this work. So this is a desk you'll see in there. So these are some still lifes. So it is an organic studio. It's changing every day. Right now it's very organized, but I usually have worked very tight. I'm letting it just, and so I've been drawing these still lifes instead of taking photos of them, of little fragments of it, which will then also be part of a book when I'm done with the residency about the organic classroom. So these are all shelves that I built. So last thing is that prior to this, I'd only used sheet wood, primarily Baltic birch plywood that was coming from Japan that I could get in Berkeley. That plant burned down during COVID. So the only place to get that wood was then in Russia. So I was like, no. So I started working in clay. I will eventually start working in clay here. I mean, I've only been here for a couple weeks. I have a kiln at my house in Montrose, which we're going to be opening up a workshop for other people to come use that studio as well, to fire, to build. So this is going to extend after this residency as well. So I got here for the residency, and in the garden, crepe myrtles fell during the hurricane. And I looked at all that wood and I thought, what a shame that like we can't repurpose this. Like how can I be here as a wood artist and not reclaim this wood that's been like traumatized? So some of the staff cut down the trees into pieces, and then painstakingly I cut 250 branches for the walking stick demo that they did here for Hands on Houston. But now I'm working with that wood too. And I'm going to be building benches out of the stumps. So finding a way to work with sheet material and more organic material, which is new for me, but I'm really seeing these as like broken limbs essentially, right? So it's like self-portraiture, which is then allowing me to bring the body in, which will be the next. Yeah, so thanks for listening. I hope you all, come by, not just today. Like I'm trying to keep it as like not talking about specific traumas as much, because in reclaiming my name, a lot of past talks have been about people trying to extract these stories that are deeply traumatic. So I'm trying to find a way of keeping those for myself and figuring out how to talk about trauma in a way that's helpful to other people, but doesn't harm me anymore. So I appreciate everyone's patience while figuring it out.
Thank you. Jamie. Does anyone have any questions for Jamie?
Or some of the drawings in the first.
So these drawings, this was my COVID map. Yeah, so yeah, I stick and poked something like I living in New Mexico for a long time. I'm a big believer in milagros and like miracles. Like my whole life has been a freaking miracle. So I carry miracles with me. Lots of information. I mean, it's like that's the thing I'm finding right now is like, how do we share information? Right? Like if we're being like if AI is this thing and they can track every movement, how do we talk? How do we share it? It's like even just me wearing this little button that says I like Yanko. One of the most beautiful films I've ever seen in 15 minutes. He is like the freest spirit, lives on a houseboat in Sausalito. It's incredible. And I'm finding like Prada and I talked about, like I have all this beautiful jewelry that was gifted to me from people in Santa Fe that I was an ally for, and they give me a piece. And I kept it all locked up because I was afraid to wear it because I didn't want it stolen from me. But after this last incident and becoming Jamie, I'm like, how did you put it, Prada? Like, why do we only break out our nicest dishes for
the guests when you're supposed to enjoy it for yourself?
Yep. And then these were gifted to me that way, but then you're just, you get so tight. So this studio, we'll see, it's opening up.
So with the incorporation of like organic materials,
Mhm.
is that something you practice and have considered incorporating like
Yes, so it's not completely new, and I was thinking about this because the show I did at Wilmeyer Sculpture Garden was large sculptural installation of very small ceramics, and it's a sculpture park, so it faced out to enormous monumental, so it was kind of like pushing that. And when my father passed, I brought him up to the Jemez Mountains to a waterfall that I went to when he and I first were living together in New Mexico. And we went in this waterfall, it's so cold that our legs buckled, we were like baby deer. And so my therapist has told me now, it's like, don't remember the trauma of his passing. Like, remember that, right? When you're just children together, playing. So I have jars and jars and jars of that water where you can part of nature again, and bacteria grows in them, changes the color of the pigments I'm mixing, and make stains out of them. I pull in different dirt, different things to like really affect the color of the paint I'm using. Like right now in my studio in Montrose, which I'm painting again. So Jamie was like, you know what? Why did I go to grad school on a full scholarship as a painter? I only painted for 3 years. Did a talk and yell about this painting. And let some teacher who didn't even know me say, you can't paint. It's like, why do we do this to ourselves? So I started painting again. And the first thing I did to start painting again was I took some of that water, took a little bit of Mescal, I took a little bit of Keystone water, and I mixed it up, and just went for it. So these things have always been kind of part of
What color did it turn out?
what it did, it created this wash. So I'm like starting, when I was making ceramics and sculptures, like material ambiguity has always been something I'm interested in. Like I did a show out of wood, and like an old carpenter's trick that I learned is like mixing sawdust with glue. It's used a lot in folk art too. And I cover it, and people would think they were ceramic. Like Freeze magazine actually reviewed a show and said they were ceramic. They didn't even look at, it was like, okay. So then I started making ceramics, but now I'm back into the wood, and the clay will then come in too. So yeah. Prada, what's up?
What's up?
We're all, it's like so wonderful. This has been like,
That's my friend.
yeah.
I guess I would ask if you know where you see yourself going with your work.
Where I see myself going, that's what's so interesting right now for me, is that I've had, like last year I had 3 solo exhibitions within 3 months. It was insane. I lost 20 pounds, I was up all night, like my house in Santa Fe, the kiln was by the bed. So it was just like, it just felt like this furnace. Yeah, so I did the last show at Ratio 3, right? So I didn't know, like my goal was to always show at that gallery. I'd walk past it to my studio every day. And then I started working. And the last show I did was the last show the gallery ever did, unbeknownst to me. So I make all this work and then find out after the opening that it's the last show. So I invited my friend to come and play a dirge during the last hour of the show, because nobody knew the gallery was closing that was there, except the staff. The musician didn't need it. And then the next day it was announced. So it's like, it's been these incredible cycles of just listening, acting. So I guess to answer your question, right now is a moment of me trying to not monetize what I'm doing or not like think about it in an institutional setting. Because I can already start seeing things coming together. But this is just a play space, like you're saying. It's like, this is a place where I can just safely play, listen to people, be influenced by others, vice versa, share stories. And then I think it's going to become something else. I also co-run a gallery in Santa Fe called Best Western. Same way we curate 4 shows a year. Got an Andy Warhol grant to fund it. It's been wonderful. They're intergenerational conversations, mostly long trust building studio visits, and then getting to present work. So yeah, right now there's just a lot going on, you know, and I'm starting like essentially figuring out how to incorporate the design work in with the painting, and I think it's starting to like mesh. So by the end of this residency, what I'd like to have is like a home in there. So you can see where you can sit, you can have a painting, you can have cups, you know, so you can act like everything is activated. So, but in that, like, when I talk about constructivism, what I'm realizing is right now, and it's what's leading me forward, is that Latin American constructivism, Americans, all of the constructivists and Dadaists during World War I, right? There was bombs falling from the sky. It was terrifying. They, instead of trying to like speak back to somebody who's not going to listen, they faced them with nonsense. They said, if the world is shit, we're going to throw fertilizer at you. And Kurt Schwitter's, like, his Merzbow, his house, got bombed. There's photographs of it in my studio. I mean, and it's eerie because as I started this process, I was like, oh. And then I went and saw Andre 3000 a couple weeks ago. He goes up on stage, right? Most of the people thought they were coming to see Outcast. Oh no. Mm-hmm. You're not familiar. He's making this beautiful meditative music now. And he comes on, you see him for a second. 2 people come out, put cones on the side of the stage, put a laser level across, and the lights come. He's like, you're not seeing me, you're just not listening. And he only spoke to do a Dadaist mumble poem as a cipher. So I'm like, this is in the air right now. Like, this is how it's like my friend Saif Azouz, who's going to be having a show here in January. We talk about, he's Palestinian native, and we talk about like how our art can be beautiful, but it can be a Trojan horse, right? And I think that like that's what I'm trying to think about.
Well, thank you so much, Jamie. And I think your studio is well on the way to looking like home. And
that's what people keep telling me, so I guess that's good.
This is a great transition. Thank you all for coming. The resident studios are open, yeah, so if you'd like to go check out their work in person,
and
please do.
Come visit anytime. Like, it's been really nice.
Here.